been bloody tasty, thank you very much. My name's Dave Greaves. I've been doing stand-up comedy for a few years now, about 5-6 years. I love it, it's an absolute passion of mine. But before I did stand-up comedy, I was a truck driver. Surprise. Driving a truck's not fun. So much of it is simply staring out of a windscreen. White line, white line, white line. It's before I started the truck. At work, the boss insists on regular drug testing. He's still not happy with the quality of the meth.
My name's Dave Greaves, stand-up comedian in Melbourne. I've been doing stand-up comedy for almost 7 years now. I also run two gigs every Thursday night at Humdinger in Frankston, and once a month at the Frankston Brewhouse, also in Frankston. Keeping me busy, having a lot of fun. I grew up originally in Burwood, in Melbourne, and just through work, I basically moved my way out to the southeastern suburbs, and I've spent pretty much the rest of my life kind of around there. Done a bit of travelling, which has been fantastic, but living down the peninsula way. My full-time career was a truck driver, still is kind of, but prior to that I worked as a screen printer, and I was lucky enough to travel to a few trade shows overseas to a couple of different countries to sample new equipment, new technologies, that sort of thing. But when the GFC hit, screen printing went all offshore. About 90% of the industry disappeared within about 6 months. So I had to pivot and get myself a new career. Very, very boring, with moments of sheer terror. When you've got when you're traveling down the road and there's nothing happening, you know, you're listening to music, you're listening to a podcast, and then somebody pulls in front of you and stops, and you've got to try and wrangle 60 odd tons of metal to a stop so you don't kill someone. So yeah, nothing happens until something does, and then your adrenaline spikes pretty hard. I did a little bit of interstate, but I ended up doing a lot of local work, mostly for the waste industry. I still am licensed to carry hazardous goods and stuff like that. Up until basically military ordnance and radioactive materials, I'm not allowed to carry that. I figured that was a line that I didn't want to cross. I pulled onto the Westgate Freeway on one occasion, shifted across lanes, and being the Westgate Freeway, by the time you get to the bridge, everything's virtually stopped. So I was pulling into a quiet stop. Next thing I know, I heard the unmistakable sound of all 4 tyres locking up on a car. And I looked in both mirrors, and all I could see was white smoke coming towards me. I thought, this is not going to be good. So I waited for it, but there was no bang. Nothing happened. But I had smoke literally billowing past both sides of the truck. So I get out and I walk to the back of the truck, and literally just underneath the back of my truck was the nose of a Ferrari. And he'd stopped about this far away from just writing the whole thing off. So I took photos and sent them to the boss and said, I nearly came home with a Ferrari trailer. It's always been a thought. I grew up in a family that always told stories, and whether it was car clubs, whether it was scouts, anything like that, there was always stories to be told. My dad was an amazing storyteller. Never on stage or anything like that, but he'd walk into a room and he was an automotive engineer, and he could actually talk about what was required to fix a motor, to fix a problem. And people would be hanging off his words because of the way he spoke and what he was saying. And I always remembered that. And I kind of started to emulate that when I was younger. And I was bad. I was really bad at it. But as I got older, I got better at it. I had my own stories and I was telling people. When I was younger, I got into some interesting situations with jobs that I'd done in the lead up to finding a career and things like that. And I remember I was about 22 and I was at a party and I was just telling some stories. And I had some people say to me, why don't you do stand-up comedy? I didn't really think too much of it, but it's always played on me. And when I got married, had kids, kind of life got in the way of that. None of which I regret. But my kids are older now. They don't need to be looked after anywhere near as much. And so I started talking about wanting to do a little bit of stand-up comedy and wanting to give it a try. And about 7 years ago, my kids actually bought me a comedy course, and went and did that, found out about the industry, and kind of kicked off from there. Turns out I really like it. I really enjoy it. I like getting the laughter, and it's quickly become a passion. Building a joke, well, probably the most basic explanation of a joke is a story with a surprise at the end. That's it. That's what a joke is. The form that takes is, it can be wordplay, it can be silliness, it can be anything along those lines. Probably one that's more relatable to a lot of people in industries is one of my jokes is, at work our boss insists on regular drug testing. It's an everyday thing. But I finish it off by saying, and he's still not happy with the quality of the meth. It's not the drug testing you were thinking of. So that's the surprise, that's the twist. That's the twist at the end. And different comics with different styles have different ways of achieving that for themselves. There are other comedians that I know who deal with props, and quite often the prop is the surprise. One of the comedians that I know, the prop is the setup. And then he just gets up on stage and says one line, and every single time I've seen him do it, everyone's fallen apart. His jokes, I won't tell you what they are. But that's the building of the joke. Think of it this way: it's a line that's used regularly when people are talking about it. The story is normal, twist, and that's what you've got to do. That's what you build up the story, and then you do a twist at the end. I look at the venue. I try and find out a little bit about the demographic of the venue to see what sort of comedy I'm going to use the words get away with. That's probably a little harsh, and I plan to set around that. Part of it is what I think that they will appreciate. Part of it is what I feel like I want to do. Because if you go into a gig feeling good about what you're about to do, that comes across. And the audience sees that, and then the audience is more likely to get on board. So that's the way I approach it. I've tried really hard to have the humour that I have be able to basically cross demographics as best I can. I'm not trying to please everybody, but I want to see the enjoyment. I want to see the fun. And I don't care who you are. I don't care what gender you are. I don't care about any of that. If you're smiling and you're having fun, I'm very happy with it. Shat myself. Yeah, I hope you can put that on your podcast. Yeah. I shat myself. And it still happens occasionally. Yeah, I get nervous. Yeah, you have those moments. Sometimes it's amazing what can set you off. Like if the comedian before you doesn't have a good set, that makes you nervous. That can make you very nervous. If you see somebody in the audience that you didn't, it's like, oh my God, they're here? Oh no, that can make you nervous. Sometimes it's just the thing that happens. Why am I nervous? I had that a couple of weeks ago. I went to a gig and I was nervous as. I'm standing there going, why am I this nervous? These people look like the sort of people that'll enjoy my humour, and why am I nervous? You just get nervous. But if they're all laughing, it doesn't matter. You've done your job, you've had a good set, and you hop off. So yeah, I tend to care less about the person before me doing well. Probably for me, the worst situation is when the comedian before me doesn't do well, and then the MC gets up and goes, well, you people are all horrible for not laughing at that. Here's Dave. Oh no, that's the worst situation for me personally. The fear, you need to recognise where your fear comes from. If you like something, singing, stand-up comedy, woodwork, anything, doesn't matter what it is. If you like something, you aren't scared of it. What you are scared of is failure. Failure is nothing to be scared of. I mean, let's break it down. Have you ever cooked dinner one night and taken a bite of it and gone, oh, that was wrong. No, not doing that. You failed at cooking dinner. What does it matter? You either put up with it and eat it, or you throw it out and you order out. What's the problem? Yeah, you wasted a little bit of time. So what? Recognise where your fear comes from, because if it's simply a fear of failure, I view that as character building. I've always viewed that as character building. Walking into the unknown is character building. And I don't think there's enough character building going on anymore. I think we should all reach out, stretch and try new things, if for no other reason than to laugh about it afterwards. And if you happen to find a passion, whether it turns out to be a business whether it turns out to be a hobby, or whether it just turns out to be something you look back on and say, hey, I enjoyed that. So at the moment, my day job, I'm a truck driving instructor, and so we had a student come in and she didn't want her license. So we're a truck driving group that teaches people how to drive trucks. But this particular woman didn't want her license. And she was in her 70s. And all she wanted to do was drive a truck so she could tick it off her bucket list. So she came in and she paid for 4 hours of training. There was no paperwork to do. And it's been the longest time since I've seen somebody with that big of a smile on their face. Because all she did was tick something off her bucket list. She actually drove it pretty damn well. When you factor in that she's never driven a truck and she's in her 70s, the instructor that had said, I reckon she'd have gotten her license. But it was just a bucket list thing. And the smile that woman had was priceless. Absolutely priceless. She was nervous before she got into the truck, but she just did it. Because ultimately the worst thing that could happen is that the instructor drives back and it turns out she wasn't that good at it. But she ticked it off her bucket list. And that sort of attitude, just to go out and try it. You know, if you've got a passion to do something, if you want to try something, go and do it, because the only thing that you'll find out, and the worst case scenario, is that it's not for you, and it's still an experience and you can still grow from it. Forward. Just forward. Just one step after the other. Keep going. I'm a compulsive planner and I have all sorts of business plans, breakdowns, whatever you want to call them, about ways I could head as the opportunity arises. And I know it sounds corny these days, but you don't plan to fail, you fail to plan. Some things I'm not in a position to do anything about right now, and it is what it is. 6 months' time, 12 months' time, things might be a bit different. So I've got a number of plans that I'd like to see happen, but I'm not betting on them. I just want to be ready if the opportunity arises. So literally all I'm doing is continuing writing, continuing practicing, expanding my joke book that I can call upon, trying new ideas as well, trying a few new styles of comedy as I feel comfortable with them, and just keep moving forward from there. If I end up getting to a point where I can sell out a theatre, that's amazing. But I'm not betting myself on it, but I'm going to be ready if it gets to that point. Enjoy the journey. Jumping to the end of the book means that you miss out on a whole bunch of stuff. Whether that book's a suspense or a romance novel or anything like that, you miss out on so much of your own story. Don't rush your own story. Live your story and stop and take those moments as they come through. Because if you jump straight to the end of your story, what's next? That's it. And if your story, if your journey is that quick and then you're at the end, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of time to sit in the same place. And then you've got to try and find something new. Don't be concerned about the length of time it takes you to be successful. I saw a clip from Jimmy Carr that said words to the effect of that people look at the end result, they don't look at what it took to get there. And that's what people need to understand. And unfortunately with social media, that's all anybody seems to be showing at the moment is the end result. And the end result's fantastic. You know, I want to lose 20 kilos. I'd love to click my fingers and have that. But that's not it. I've got to work at it. It's the hard truth is that for 0.0001% of the population, that quick result will happen. But don't bank on being that 0.00001% of the population. Work hard. Enjoy the journey. Take notes on the journey. It'll be a great book at the end and you'll be able to do something different with that book.